The numbers are still rolling up, so I'm going to just a second till it slows down a minute. Okay, everybody, welcome to our presentation today. I'm Abby. I'm an educational support coach here at Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center. Family Matters is one of the 2 federally funded parent training and information centers that serves the state of Illinois. We are located in Effingham, Illinois, but serve 94 counties in the state outside of the Chicagoland area. Should you live inside the Chicagoland area and need support from your parent center, you would contact FRCD, and you can find their contact information on our website. Family Matters is not a legal service agency, and any information provided to you today should not be construed as legal advice. We are funded under the U.S. Department of Education, but our views and content shared doesn't necessarily reflect the view or opinion of the U.S. Department of Education. So today, it's I don't want to say it's my favorite month out of the year because I feel like every day in my life is Autism Acceptance Day, or Autism Acceptance Month. But as we all know, April is Autism Acceptance Month, and I have been a very proud mother of a young man with complex and profound autism for, oh my gosh, 19 years now. So been a part of that autism world for 19 years now, and one of the first agencies I connected with was the Autism Program of Illinois, and I'm close to Charleston, so Charleston was where I went. So I wanted to make sure that we highlighted autism as a subject matter in our webinars this month, so I knew there was no better person to contact but Reagan. So Reagan Carey is part of the Autism Program CTF of Illinois, and she's going to give herself a small introduction, and then we're going to talk about Autism Considerations. In the chat, I have shared a link to the Google Drive that has the handouts associated today and the PowerPoint presentation. Should you have questions, you may put them in the Q&A box, and we'll take breaks periodically throughout and answer those questions. So without further ado, Ms. Reagan Carey.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm Reagan Carey. I'm a BCBA that works for CTF Illinois, serving 50% time with adults with different intellectual disabilities, including developmental disabilities with autism, all kinds of different disabilities. And then I also am the director of the autism program at CTF Illinois, and we serve, I say 18 counties, but we are kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I really don't usually turn anybody down because I don't want anybody to go out with the resources. I'm also a parent of a now 17-year-old, which is unbelievable, who's diagnosed with autism. He is a twice exceptional, so he's gifted and he has autism. And he was the first kid in our district to have an IEP that didn't have academic goals. So that was pretty interesting because I was told at first that he couldn't have one because, you know, that's kind of when it went, and that's many years ago. So I'm coming from this as a provider, as a parent, and the way I kind of approach this, as you'll see, is what tools are the teachers using, and how can we use that in order to educate ourselves to advocate for our kids. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PowerPoint. I should say I've been in disability services since I was 19 years old. Not going to work. There we go. And have been with CTF Illinois since June of 2000. So I'm coming up on 24 years there. I've been the autism director for, I think, over 10. And I've just had many roles. It's given me an interesting perspective on not just supporting kids with autism, but adults with autisms, and then of course the transition. So, and then being a BCBA, I do a lot of parent training. That's kind of what I've been focusing on. Since there is such a huge need for ABA therapy, I'd really be limiting if all I did was just individual therapy with kiddos, which I know is a huge need. I am very aware, but it's not something I provide right now. So I am part of the autism program. Like I said, this is the mission statement. We are the only state with an autism network. So I think that that's something very, to be proud of. And we've been in existence, I think, since 2013. Um, these are all of our locations. I had the opportunity 2 years ago to bring EIU on as a partner. So it started with me working with the Autism Center at EIU. They were providing support for our parent group at the time. Students, I was training students in their department on autism. That evolved to us coming up with a diagnostic team. And then this last year, we have a full diagnostic team that does differential diagnosis out of EIU. And I'm on a portion of that team as well. So if you look on that map, there's not many taps around us. So kind of see where it's singled out. These are different services for my site. We're looking at social skills groups. Now this is intermittent depending on need, depending on capacity. I am a 50% employee and I do have a full-time employee, Melody. She is who takes the intakes for anybody that's on the wait list for the EIU screening or diagnostic list. Does a ton of visual supports and research and just giving different resources out. I complete training, education awareness, and then, like I said, what I really have focused on recently is parent training based on ABA. I do offer an 11-week training of ABA supports specific. It's called a Ruby, and it's through the Ruby Parent Network for challenging behaviors. So that is something that if you're really struggling, it's an evidence-based approach to behavior, specifically geared toward parents. Here's all that great info. We are funded by the Department of Human Services of Illinois. So I want to make sure and put that out there as well. So for our learners' outcomes, I'll just go through this briefly. I recognize that probably most of the attendees have a child diagnosed with autism, but I am going to go just quickly through the criteria for the DSM-5. We're going to go through the educational rights and responsibilities, the Understanding Special Education Illinois, the parent guide, briefly, and the Autism Considerations from ISB. That's the form 3454V. And IEP section where the considerations are actually documented in the IEP. We're going to talk about how those considerations can be incorporated into your student's IEP, and then a brief introduction into some evidence-based strategies and interventions. So just some terms to jump into. When we talk about communication, we're talking about verbal, or what I would say vocal, and non-vocal during this training. Keeping our minds open to all behavior. Everything is communication. I always say that, like, all behavior is communication, regardless of how it is expressed. We are communicating, and our children are able to make their needs known in many, many ways. Restrictive behaviors, that's that instance on sameness and flexibility of routine, difficulty with transition and change. We're only interested in one topic. And then we have the repetitive behaviors. So that's your stereotypy or repeated movements. People look at like the fingers in the face or rocking. Some things like lining up toys, saying the same things repeatedly, or even just a response to bright lights and sounds. So all of these restricted and repetitive behaviors look so different in all of our children, right? I'm sure everybody's heard, if you've met one child with autism, you've met one child with autism. And there's nothing more true than that statement. And Abby and I were just discussing how the presentation is so different, with girls to boys as well. So just keeping these things in mind. Reciprocity is something that we're looking for in social communication. That's that back and forth engagement on a similar topic. And then generalization. So that's the idea of applying what we learn in a variety of settings and to a variety of people. And for our children, that is the goal. We would like them not only to learn new school skills, but be able to do them at home, at school, at a restaurant, at the grocery store, right? We want them to generalize those skills. Of course, the characteristics for being diagnosed, we're looking at the two areas. So challenges with social communication and interaction, and restrictive and repetitive behaviors. And then this is the current severity level of this for the spectrum. So I brought this up because when we move forward, it'll talk about the other criteria prior to the DSM-5, where PDD-NOS and classic autism, Rett fell under that, and some different diagnoses. Now we only have this. When your child's diagnosed now, it is just autism, and then they have severity level. What I like to think about this is these are support levels. Again, on a lot of children, and they say, oh, level 3 requiring substantial support, but with that support, have very, very good ways to communicate, to do things, to move throughout their community. Then I've worked with people that have level 1 and really have struggled in many different ways. So it looks different for everyone. But this is about support, not about kind of like a cap or a comparison. And I feel like that's somehow how it's taken, is that if my child is level 3, then wow, they have a different functioning level. But it's specific to this criteria, and I don't feel like these levels defined people where they're at and what their potential is. So I just really want to point out that one of the things that I appreciate and enjoy working with autism is knowing with proper strategies and supports, people do better. They advance, they get better in school, in their homes, their social lives. It's a matter of us figuring out how can we wrap that around them in a way that suits their needs, because we don't have any cookie cutters for autism support. So this is from the Parent Guide to Special Education, and I thought it was really interesting. So I've been to quite a few IEPs in my life from my son, as well as attending, other people's children's IEPs. And when you're given the guide, I get this really bad copy. I don't know if anybody else, I wish we could do I could see everybody and see if there's any raised hands, but I get the most beat up copy of, I don't know, I'm sure it comes from a stack. And honestly, it's ooh, thanks. I've got this. And I know they have to give it to us, and I appreciate that. This one is actually online on ISB's website. It was founded to be super user-friendly. It's a PDF version. It actually states you'll see where the forms are. So what I've done is kind of made clippets from it. And then at the end, I do have the links to where I got all of these forms. And so you would be able to go look yourself. So the big thing to point out is just because the criteria for autism changed for the DSM, not the criteria, but the name of how we're going to do this, it didn't change within the school system. Okay, so it is still applying autistic disorder, childhood is disintegrative, I can never say that disorder, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and the diagnosis previously identified as Asperger's syndrome. So there isn't necessarily a need to get your child reevaluated with something else. It should be recognized within the school as autism, right? Another thing that I thought was really interesting was in the special education and related services portion of the IEP. So it says these services and supports help the students advance toward annual goals, make progress in the general curriculum, participate in extracurricular and non-academic activities, which in the IEPs I've been in, has not been a focus or a mention. And I think that that's something that we need to look at. Community is safety, and the more exposure that children have to their peers and to their community, the safer they are. The more people who know your child, the safer your child is. So I feel like we should be taking advantage of the school and say, okay, how is that offered? What non-academic activities, are available to my child? They say special education, or I mean, Special Olympics, that's great, but what else? Like, what else can we be doing? Um, and then IEP should include any additional training or support needed by the parents, educators, and paraprofessionals. Okay, so what I typically find is that the training component is missed. So if you feel that the educator or paraprofessional or you yourself need more support, need more education, this is where you're going to request it. And I highly recommend it. So, that's a service that we can provide at TAP. I know that there are other agencies that are available to provide this. It doesn't have to be us, but I think this is what we really need to kind of push. There is a shortage in special educators, at least in my district, and I know throughout Illinois in general, and probably through the United States. And there's a lack of paraprofessionals. So if your child's relying on the support of a paraprofessional, what is that person's background? What is their exposure to autism? And how is the person that's going to be spending the most direct time with your child being trained to do that properly? So really, we're just going to, press upon this. It's often skipped. I feel like it's a very quick thing, at least in the IEPs I've been in. There's always an exception. People always do it differently. And I'm not saying that the IEPs I've been in have been bad in any way. I've actually not had many bad experiences ever. I've been in a lot of them. So, but the more you know, the more you can ask for, right? The other part I wanted to kind of just go over briefly is the idea of this assistive technology devices and services. So when I hear this, I always think of like AAC devices, right? And that too, I think, is interpreted by many of the educators as that. So it includes low tech pencil grips, flints, paper stabilizers, high tech computers, tablets, communication devices. These devices include the entire range of supported tools and equipment, from adaptive spoons to wheelchairs, from apps on a tablet to a computer system for environmental control. It doesn't include a medical device, okay? An assistive technology service means any service that directly assists uh, a child with a disability receive and uses assistive technology device, includes evaluating the child's needs, acquiring and customizing the necessary device, and training the child, staff, and parents/guardians on the use of this device, okay? So we are using these things. We are using these schedules. We are using different low-tech things, and we are hopefully getting to the point where there is more AAC devices available. I know that's been a really big push within our preschools here. We partner with EIU, and we have a special educator that's been coming in and working along with speech and language to really kind of get those evals done, push them into the classroom, get kids experience with them. It won't matter if it doesn't go home with them and you don't know how to use it. Okay. So if your child does have a device and you don't know how to use it, this is where it says right here that you should be getting the necessary training. Okay. So again, really going back to this idea of partnering with the school to get the needs of your child met. I also understand that some kids don't want to use it at home. Absolutely. I get that. I also hear a lot, well, I understand them, so I don't need the pictures or the supports. Well, you understand them. I don't. So you're limiting the opportunity of communication to outsiders when we aren't putting things in place where a child can express themselves. I would love to think that I'm always going to be there for my child, but I'm very realistic in knowing I'm not. Okay.
Reagan, we have a
Yep.
question regarding AAC device or just communication or assistive technology in general. So I am a modeling parent. I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but I understand Davin's needs, my oldest son, but not everybody does around him. So it's my job to model the use of the device. So I have a shirt that says every day I'm modeling. And I mean, that's who I am. But As far as assistive technology, I get this comment a lot. The school has provided the device, and then they say that it cannot leave the home, leave the school. That it has to stay at school. They're worried about it getting broken, etc. So we actually address this in another presentation through the Illinois Assistive Technology Program. So I mean, unless Reagan feels comfortable answering it, I don't want to put her on the spot. Okay, so you
Go
can
ahead.
reference that. You can absolutely call our office to talk about what those options are. There is some school code and legislation that goes along with that assistive technology for your students. So, um, so as far as that question goes, absolutely reach back out to us. Another one that we have, and I just had this last week. Do you serve adults as well as children, Reagan, at the autism program?
We go up to 22 years old.
Okay. All right.
Yes. I will say though that personally, I have found time to use our resource room to offer services and some different things for older children, young adults, and their parents to help them in some transition stuff. You know, part of who I am today is because I was a parent that struggled.
Yep.
And I really have tried hard to not have that happen to others because it's a very lonely place. And if we can do it, we're going to try to do it. So I do capture that, under the resource room. You guys are in fact community, even if you're, have autism, right?
Yeah.
Um, still caregivers, even when your children are older, right? I always say we're not done teaching these babies. I don't care if they're 50. So yeah, so the grant actually goes to 22. So when it comes to direct services, groups, direct parent training, individualized, yes, that's all up to 22.
Okay, and I know there's more questions in the chat box. We will absolutely address them further because I know some of the questions are answered throughout the presentation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yes. So AAC devices, I'm a big fan of having high tech and low tech, a backup version. You never know when the battery's going to go out. You never know when it's going to get tossed or get water on it or something like that. But I really like what you said, Abby, about modeling the behavior you expect. We should be doing that with all behavior. If we want our children to express themselves social emotionally, we should be expressing ourselves socially emotionally. So that is one of the things that I really try to push with parents is we want to model the behavior we expect from our children. And that can be anything from social skills to the way we brush our teeth or wash the dishes, right? And then we also want to put language to that and talk through processes as much as possible. So really kind of get them involved if we can. I always say we're not just, we may be working with a 5-year-old, but we have to look towards that future even at 5 because we're raising employees and employers. And partners, right? We want them to have relationships as they get older as well. This too is in there. Let's see. So this is just I thought this was interesting to include because this is what you get in the Parent's Guide to Special Education. There's the paragraph that I kind of mentioned earlier. So it's in there twice. And then you get a limit here as far as these questions, right? And these are your considerations that we're here to talk about. The requirements with this are on the form. It says this 514, this was interesting. When I put that in there in ISB, I got different language IEPs. So I never actually found that form. And I've heard a lot of people say that about the website. So that's one of the reasons I included the links of where I got the things. Because it wasn't the easiest thing to navigate and search through. So, and who has time, unless you're paid to search through all of the things. So I just wanted to show you what the parent guide does say about it. And then this is what the teacher has. And the instructions is to complete this page when the team has identified a student has as having a disability of autism. Students with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, may have unique educational strengths needs as a result of the 7 core areas in accordance of this section, Illinois School Code. The following information is provided to assist an IEP team in understanding the needs of a student on the autism spectrum in these areas, and therefore just want to say that, develop a more effective educational program. So in my experience, the autism consideration is typically done at the end of the meeting after the goals have already been developed, and is almost like an afterthought. And so my question and I was going to ask you this, Abby, like, can you request to do it first?
Absolutely. There's nothing
Okay.
to say you have to do it last. I like to do mine first because I love this page. I love this page. I feel like some of the barriers that my son, I have 3 children and a husband on the spectrum, so we are definitely an autism family. I feel like some of the challenges that comes along with his education are resolved very quickly when we review the autism considerations. So sometimes we'll just have a meeting and go over the autism considerations and how to update that. So a lot of people go over it during their eligibility portion. I understand that, but just keep in mind, even if your student has an IEP and is not eligible under autism, maybe they're under developmental delay or speech and language, if they have a medical diagnosis of autism, talk about filling this page out, okay? Because this is one of the best things I think that we've done under our Illinois school code is put this in place because it really helps the students out a lot.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so to me, this should be first and foremost, okay? But again, what's interesting is this is what is they are filling out. So it just says, the needs of the student and the supports of the student in each of the areas, right? But when we move in to the next portion, which is the instructions of filling it out, which I'll go through after this, my little discussion here, you see the difference. And I feel like this is why it's kind of not seen as significant, because unless they're going by the instructions of how to do it, it's typically just a quick conversation of each one. So I really want to press upon, let's use the tools that they are given as educators to educate ourselves and empower ourselves to help get the best IEP for our kids. So what we should think of when we're doing this is creating a cheat sheet for your child. Now, I've made this recommendation. I make it all of the time, especially when we're transitioning from one grade to another, early childhood to kindergarten, EI to early childhood, right? Anytime that your child is placed in a new system, I also use my cheat sheet for my family. I have a very wonderful and supportive family, but they raised amazing kids that did not need the same supports as my child. And that is great, but I couldn't parent my child the way that they were parenting their children. So just thinking about that, I used the cheat sheet that I created for my son and then brought it to my family and used it. So Abby, do you have something else or are you just thinking real hard? Thinking real hard?
I'm on mute too. I was thinking hard. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Okay. So first and foremost, what's your child's non-negotiables? Like what is going to make and break your kid? Is it that if my child is wet, the clothes are going to come off? Right? That is something important to know. Is it that he has to have something in his hand with him at all times so that, he doesn't do this? That's the replacement thing that we had. Just different things like that. And we know these things about our children typically. These are the non-negotiables. If we don't have these things, then our lives aren't as good. So we need to be sharing those. What are your child's interests, preferences, and reinforcers? And when I say reinforcers, I'm talking about the things that your child is willing to work for, right? A preference is I like it. A reinforcer is I will do it for that. Okay. There's kind of like, I think it was Barbara Doyle that used to say something like, if I had one t-shirt for a kid with autism, it'd be like, don't waste my time, right? Because our children, it has to have purpose for them, right? And I liken it to, you wouldn't go to work if you didn't get paid, right? There has to be purpose, for most people with autism, work is play, play is work. And that those down times, unstructured times is when we are falling apart. So, and also I like to use those interests to benefit. I don't try to fight them. I try to work with them and I try to explore those, because then I'm like, oh, this is what we're interested in. How can we build upon this? What can we look about career wise, this wise, So, I think it's really important. And I think it's important for them to focus on what makes your child happy, what they enjoy, and not just deficits. I think that that's really hard part of an IEP, is that most of us are very aware of where our children struggle, because we're living it 24/7. We're not leaving at the end of the day. So hearing that again, get it, need to. But you know what? What about that child's strength section? Let's put this stuff in there. Let's have that be 4 paragraphs long and not 2 sentences, right? So I know that's not the considerations, but in the perfect world, I would like these to be based on strengths rather than weaknesses, and skill building, right? Because it's IEPs, we're building skills. What makes your child happy? What are behavioral triggers for your child? Something for my son was high pitched voices. Talk to you like this. That was about like, you might just be smacked. It could happen. And I would say this person is not going to be a good fit, right? So if you know these things, if someone's saying happy birthday for many, many years, complete meltdown from my child. I think I have a little PTSD when it comes to the song now at this point. Way too many birthday parties before I figured out, oh my gosh, this is where we keep falling apart. He still, to this day, now he chooses not to have a party and we don't sing it still. And I'm like, okay, because it really was for me, I guess. What does your child need to calm down? Right? I feel like there's a lot of, I don't know. We just don't know. It becomes kind of this chaos and then a consequence and not a support. So when we're at our highest, how can you help get us back to baseline? And you as parents know these things. What are you doing at home that works, right? Let's share that. And then how can you support the school in educating you? I am not saying that every meeting is going to be great or we're all going to agree, but my belief is that the intention of everyone in the IEP is to support your child. So by offering my assistance, my help, and not just as a professional, but as a parent, what can I do to help you? And this can go a little bit both ways. I've had other parents be turned down. I have been told when I've offered this when my child was little and really struggled behaviorally, like, oh, we'll be fine. Don't worry. And then 2 weeks later, I'm getting all these calls and all of these problems. And I'm like, no, I've been trying to tell you. I get that you're a great teacher, but you haven't taught my child before. And I'm trying to help you. So those are some things to think about. So we're going to go through, this is what the instructions are. So this is ISB form 34-54V, and this is in the instructions to fill out an IEP in Illinois. Okay, so this is to fill out those autism considerations. Those we're going through, this is about verbal and nonverbal communication needs, and these are the questions that you should consider. So as we go through these, I, will give some examples of things that I'd like to kind of like highlighted a bit. We don't have a ton of time, but prior to your child's IEP, if you were to go through these and answer these and come into a meeting informed, I'm a big fan also of writing the things down, because I might be great in your kid's IEP, but in my kid's IEP, I was blubbery, heightened, and we know that the more heightened we are, the less cognition we have. And then I would leave and think, oh, I don't even remember, or I forgot to say this, or would get overwhelmed and not speak up. So I'm a big fan of documenting things that will help. So going through this, it's not just about the nonverbal communication that what we would think of. It is current level of communication, um, the functions for which the student uses and understands language. So that's your receptive language. How is he really understanding it? I work with an older person with autism, and if I want to check for understanding, I write the question down, he writes the answer, he rips it up, and he throws it away. So if I want to put something new up on a wall, for instance, I know that if I just put it up, it would go in the garbage because it did not belong there. Okay, it did not belong there. But if I was to say, hi, I would like to decorate this so that your home looks better. Do you like it? Can we put it on the wall? He says yes, rips up the paper. That will stay up, right? So that person needs written communication and does better. Yes. Can he understand what I'm saying? Yes. But is he comprehending what I'm saying and what I'm asking? So understanding nonverbal communication, eye gaze, facial expressions, gestures. A lot of our kiddos really struggle with mimicking. So we get into the situations where the expectation in school time or other things is that they're supposed to clap, they're supposed to stomp, they're supposed to be doing these things. Well, what kind of assistance does your child need to do that? Or is that a skill that we need to be working on? Because mimicking is a great skill to learn, right? Emerging communication. So what are we working on? What are we getting through to? Communication's most effective for the student. I hear this quite a bit as far as, well, they use sign with him, but he won't use sign at home, or he understands signs, but he won't use sign. All the kids are so different. And then again, ability to use and understand nonverbal communication when it comes to their eye gaze, facial expressions, and gestures. So it's the ability to not just use it, but to understand it. Are we good on questions? Keep going. Okay. All right. So this one I think is something that's really overlooked: social interaction skills and proficiencies. So part of the definition of having autism is having problems in the area of social communication, and every day is social communication at school. So it's interesting when I hear, well, it doesn't affect them at school. Well, just by definition of autism, if you struggle with social communication, and just interacting with the teacher is social communication, interacting with a peer is social communication. So every aspect of our children's life is affected by this. So we want to look at this, make sure that it's being addressed. It talks about seeming distant, avoidant, unable to initiate social interaction. I was recently talking to someone and they went to observe their child, and at the playground, he goes underneath a little thing and he sits down and he's not interacting. He's not causing any problems, but he's not building peer relationships. He isn't to initiate and do. So that's not what recess is for. Recess is for, interacting and initiating. So just kind of thinking about this. Are we teaching children how to imagine? Or do they have unusual play activities? A lot of our kiddos are drawn to items that other kids may not be, and that's the use of play. So again, that cheat sheet, this is what we're into right now, and how can we shape that so it's appropriate for the classroom? And then the pragmatics. So, this is our understanding of context, what is, the different social rules in each of the areas? How do I understand what my peers are saying? So that, to me, especially, when you look at the level 1, is the biggest interference. Often adults with autism are either underemployed or not employed, and it's not because of intelligence. It's typically because of pragmatics and social communication. If I don't know how to work on a team, if I don't know how to ask for help, I don't know how to follow instructions, these different things, those little nuances that our life is so full of, that they need these supports in the school. So what does that look like for your student, and is it being addressed? Okay. Um, let's see, unusual responses to sensory experiences. What is going to happen when the fire alarm goes off or the bell rings or there's, the intruder drills or those things, what's going to happen? And we need to kind of keep in mind what supports need to happen. And then if there really is a true emergency, what is going to keep my child safe? Who is going to be responsible for making sure that my child isn't in the bathroom, isn't hiding? Okay, he doesn't have a one-on-one. I appreciate that. Okay, he doesn't need that academically, but he's not going to leave the school unless someone picks him up, puts him underneath their arm, and takes him kicking and screaming, right? I mean, this could be our reality, and we need to be having these conversations. Again, a different parent, somebody in the classroom was flipping the lights on and off very quickly. Well, that child had diagnosis of seizures. That no harm intent, but wasn't making that connection, right? Those different things. So that might be something I would say. My child has epilepsy, so we avoid the flickering lights and these things. We know these things, but I feel like unless I've told you, you don't know, because I can't assume that whether you're in charge of the whole school or a para. Like, I feel like that at least I know I said it and I've documented it and I've written it down, right? And maybe that's just being in human services so long. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen, right? But I never want somebody to say, well, I didn't know, right? I want you to know, and here's the page, right? So thinking about this, especially when it comes to clothing, using the restroom is very hard. The eye gaze avoidance, I see a lot of, you need to look at me, you look at me, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to gain attention, and I work on that social thing with kiddos, but sometimes the child does best without looking, and they are learning by listening. So my son, for instance, in his IEP had written that he could draw during instruction. Okay, he could answer all the questions, but if you told him to sit there and look up, that was not happening. And now we have a behavioral issue. So there's different ways to kind of incorporate these things in. Oh, another thing about sensory that I think that needs to really be considered with our kiddos is interoception. And it's not listed on here, but interoception is the sense and awareness of your body. Okay. So my body right now is telling me, my stomach right now is telling me that I'm hungry, right? And I know what that feels like. Let's say I had to go to the bathroom. I know what that feels like. Our kiddos don't really always have a great understanding of their body's feelings, and that interoception, that is off pretty much for about every person I know with autism. Okay. And a lot of our kids with autism struggle with constipation, ear infections, some chronic sinuses, drainage, all of these things. So if I don't know I'm sick, if I don't know how to express that, who's watching out for me? How are we teaching that? Are we teaching people body awareness and how to feel? Because I will tell you, if you have to poop and you're supposed to sit there and you keep telling yourself there you have to sit down, but there's no way to say that and you don't know what to do, and it ends badly. So just really thinking about how, as parents at home, we can look at that interoception and trying to figure out those keys of knowing when your child doesn't feel well or when they have to go to the bathroom, it looks like this, and conveying that, but also, to the school. I did hear an OT the other day that said that they had taken like a 3-month course on interoception. And I was like, yay, that's amazing. So I think it's coming down the pipes as far as education, but is that education getting to the special educator and the paras, and do they have an understanding of it? Again, if I don't ask and I don't say it, I don't know. Let's see, resistance to change in daily routines. Visual supports are for when you have a bad day, not necessarily your best day. Okay. And I find as children get older, these supports get taken away. They don't need them anymore. They know their routine. Well, I'll tell you, if I could find my phone, I probably put it somewhere so it won't do anything. But here is my visual support. Okay. If I did not have it, I could not function. I would not have remembered to get on here. I wouldn't have had it in my plan to prepare for this. This is my visual support. And every child needs something like this, whether they have autism or not, because we want them to be independent. So thinking about these schedules, how they know what to do next, those things, that's where this all comes in. And like I said, I see this as children get older, they say, oh, they don't need a visual schedule anymore. Okay, well, maybe they need a written schedule. My kid did a screenshot on his cell phone. So at the high school, so he's got his classes. So it doesn't look like he's doing anything but looking at his phone, but it's his schedule. Okay. Let's see. Repetitive activities, stereotype movements. You know, the discussion on whether or not these need to be corrected should be had. So I teach parents that as long as a child is safe, we don't redirect it. We don't draw attention to it. Is that going to be redirected? How are they replacing it? Because typically those actions are happening because I'm trying to ground myself. I'm trying to be okay. So if I get up and I'm pacing, I'm actually doing the right thing for my body at that time. But if I'm pacing and you tell me to sit down and I am not able to self-regulate, we might have a problem. Okay. So recognizing what your child does when it comes to these stereotyped or repetitive movements, activities, conversations, scripting, saying these things, right? They're most likely doing exactly what we want them to do. But if they're corrected, told not to, and told to stop and not given any other level, how are they going to do it? Because then we're getting into this trap where now we're relying on you, not me, to self-regulate. That's not what I want my kid to do, right? I want to teach my kid to self-regulate because people change. Now, I'm all for tools. Tools go with me. But that parent's not always going to be there. That teacher's not always going to be there, right? But I'm always going to be here, right? So what can I build into this? So just even having that conversation about what it looks like, what it needs to be, what the goals are for the school or expectations for the school. Let's put it out there before it becomes a problem where, oh, well, you know, Joey stands up and spins 3 times and sits down. It's really distracting. Okay.
And I don't know about you, Reagan, but my son definitely has different stemmings for different needs. So
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of broken that down on his form. And, you know, if Davin is pacing, he may need to use the bathroom. If Davin is, you know, drawing circles on a paper, he may need to, you know, so we've broken those down. But the important thing here is stereotypical, or what Hollywood looks like is stemming, is not necessarily what your child is doing is stemming. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure if this form says he may stem when agitated, make sure we're breaking down, because we as parents know what our students do when they need to stem. And you know, it's very frustrating when it's labeled as a bad behavior or an unwanted behavior to be stemming, when it could very easily just been saying, okay, all he needed was to sharpen his pencil, or all he needed was a fidget.
Mm-hmm. It might just be an indication for a help prompt, right? And maybe your child's indication for a help prompt is they stop their work. And the prompt shouldn't be, hey, get back to work, tap, 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 most annoying thing ever. But hey, get back to work. Instead, hey, how can I help you? Right? That approach can send someone who has more challenging behaviors, escalates easier, helping versus told. That right there might be a very simple strategy with this, right? This is what happens when he's overwhelmed sensory wise or whatever. He needs a help prompt, right? Or he needs this kind of thing or this kind of support. He might need a break, but he might not know he needs a break. So that break card, he needs to be taught how to use, and he needs it to be associated with him. So there's a lot of good intentions, but we need to figure out like, how is that functional through? What can we do? Behavior intervention strategies and supports. I find that this doesn't happen unless there's some sort of extremeness or what they find disruptive, which as a BCBA, I am focusing on preventative environmental changes, because the only way I can change your behavior is change mine or change your environment. If I want something to be different that you're doing, because I can't change you, but I can change your environment. I can change how I approach you. I can offer choices. I could do all these different things. And I focus less on the reactive because I don't even want to get there, right? And typically maladaptive or challenging behaviors are a consequence of a skill deficit. So what deficit is missing? Is it communication? And I can't tell you, no, I don't want to do this. And so I smack you when you hand me the paper, or I rip it up. What is it being, what are we communicating? Again, what is that behavior communicating to the team? And how can we build the skill so that behavior isn't needed, not what is the consequence when this happens? Okay, so we kind of need to flip it on its head a little bit on how can we prevent it, or what, by our behavior and the environment, and what skill is my child missing that we need to be focusing more on, which I would say would be driving that IEP every day to Sunday. Because my time my kid was in 3rd grade, he had a one-on-one and was spending 80% of his time outside the regular ed classroom. So did it really matter? No. He got all the work, he finished in an hour and a half, and then he would spend the rest of the time drawing. But what he did learn is if he acted up even just the minute bit, because by this point he's under a microscope, he would then be asked to leave when he's exactly what he wanted, because he didn't know what else to do with himself in that situation, didn't have that skill, and then he had a free day, right? So then we reinforced it. So looking at this, I'm not saying everybody needs a behavior plan, but it's not always a bad thing. It's just not. If we can get preventative strategies in there and you know that they work, if you know that saying no is a trigger but offering choice is great, let's do it. Let's see. And this is like the general curriculum considerations, other factors that limit participation. And I thought this was interesting because social skill development, where is that? What's that being offered, especially if my child isn't exposed to peer models? So we talked about modeling. Well, how can I expect to sit in the classroom and do my work if the people around me aren't? Okay, I may have that skill, but if that's not the expectation, having conversation at lunchtime, just different peer interactions. And again, being a part of that is really important. And then, repeated instruction and practice in multiple environments with a variety of materials and people. That is generalization, and it's listed in here, right? Executive functioning, organizing and generalizing, yes, perseverating on unimportant factors that may distract or whatever. So what is going to be distracting? How can we use that as a tool? Not a bad thing. Again, how can we shape that into something we want to see? And then how can we generalize that? Am I practicing these things in multiple places with multiple people? Is that the expectation? So I know I'm running out of time. I just wanted to include this for executive functioning, because looking back on my child's academics, I was told many times, just wait till he gets to college. Oh, just wait till he gets to high school, wait till he gets to college. I still kind of hear those things. Well, guess what? My child doesn't have all these skills, right? He doesn't. He absolutely doesn't. He isn't able to plan ahead. He doesn't know how to break things down like a work assignment and work backwards from it and organize it, right? Luckily I was able to put him, he was on the wait list for quite a while for, EIU, for executive functioning therapy, right? But at 17, this wasn't ever included in that IEP because, again, he tested very high. He's so smart. I don't care how smart he is. He can't. Knowing and doing are two different things, right? So regulating ourselves, being able to organize initiation to even start an action, that's something we really struggle with at home. It's not that he can't do it, it's that getting started. I mean, it is a rough go for us. The ability to stop an action that is not appropriate or necessary or is unnecessary. All of these things, awareness, recognition of ourselves. Are we teaching that to our kiddos? And then for me as a BCBA, I'm going to go back to socially valid. These goals need to be socially valid to your family, to your child, and what you think is best, right? If you think education or academics can take a back seat and we need to focus on social behaviors, then let's say that, right? There's time to learn, but you can't learn if you're crawling out of your skin all day long, right? We're not learning, we're not progressing. They should be observable and measurable. Okay, just thinking again, like what is going to happen? Because I feel like when we get the IEP, it says this is the goal, but I don't know what the process is to make that goal happen. So can you explain that to me? What's that look like and how's that going to be measured in the classroom? Focusing on increasing independence and self-determination. This needs to start very young, and even with being able to say no, right? The ability to say no is power. The ability to say no is protection. So I really don't like environments that just focus on compliance, because then as we get older, we don't know what we like. We don't know how to initiate things. And we have less independence. So we need to look at that self-determination, my I goals, what am I going to do, choice, really have an agency. And then as parents, we need to remember that the goals need to be functional in the environment in which they take place. We have to consider there's the ratios of the classroom, everything. So I'm saying all these things, but we have to be realistic about the person that's helping your child. Okay. And we need to look at that give and take, because all of those children have parents and all of those parents want the same things you do. So what does this look like in the area that he's in, and how to do it? Again, how is progress documented, observed, and proven? Is there an assessment at the beginning, an assessment at the end of the year that shows this progress? How are you showing me? Besides just, oh, he met 75%, but I don't have data. Outcomes should be generalized outside of the school. So knowing what your children are working on and you trying to generalize those at home and asking for the assistance of that. And then the last thing is that strategies and interventions should be evidence-based. So I'm going to kind of just skip through because I recognize time-wise. I do give you a definition of evidence-based. And again, as a BCBA, we want to make sure that it's best practice, that it's been tested, that we know scientifically proven to be the best thing for your child. Examples of behavior intervention. This is going through like what I would do as far as the FBA and looking at the functions of behavior. The first, then we talk about differential reinforcement. That means reinforcing the behavior we want to see and less attention to the one we don't want to see. I found there's really a focus on everything we're doing wrong as children, not what we're doing right. Why about my energy as a teacher should hopefully be going towards praising when child is sitting and being quiet, not when they act up, right? Really, what are we focusing on? Social skills training groups, again, that's something that could be included, worked into your speech and language. Maybe they are limited on speech and language support. So you know what? I understand that. Can we spend part of my child's minutes in a social skills group to practice on turn taking, waiting, and losing because my kid loses his mind? I don't know. Let's see. Visual supports, I can say it all day, every day. Yell it from the rooftops. I always say if somebody asks something more than 3 times, they need a permanent product or a reference, because they don't get tired. These schedules don't get tired. Moms get tired. Teachers get tired, right? Visual supports, timers, all of those things. And then self-management. We really need to focus on our children being independent and self-managing themselves and their skills. Again, we want them to be as independent as possible, and this is kind of that way through, and there are ways that we can do that. AAC devices, we touched base about that. Here's your resources, right, for the tech lab and Illinois assistive technology, which you referenced earlier. And then in wrap up, here are the links to the different things that I referenced off of ISBE. So I think that's it. And then the last thing I'll say here is the contact information. The phone number is directly to the autism program. Melody, who is my right-hand man, schedules all my appointments and does the initial intake for me, and is also makes different resources and things. So we start with that, and then we kind of work from there as far as services. We do have a survey, and I know that Abby probably has a survey too that she's going to email you, but there's the QR code if you're able to zap that. I'll leave it up for a minute, and it's 101, so sorry.
You are perfectly fine. At this point, I'm going to stop the recording, and then we can address a few of the questions in the comment box.
Okay, we'll do 3.
3.